Okay, Josh and Michael, hello.
Hello, Maria. Glad to be talking to you again. Got my brother here. Just to clarify, I'm the one that was talking last time. Josh,
Michael.
the clone. He's the reason
Yeah.
cloning is illegal in America.
Yeah, from the Founded Earth Brothers. Even though, Michael, you have a separate channel on YouTube, correct?
Yes. Yeah, Grace and Truth Fellowship.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's kind of a second channel we have.
Okay.
Yeah, he started that one because he wanted to keep the biblical stuff separate from the creation model, all the biblical earth stuff. He wanted to keep that separate so that people could come there if they weren't ready for that just yet.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Mm-hmm.
he's been slacking though. He hasn't put out a video since the
No.
final card.
No, because I'm
Somewhat.
following Michael's channel and there's nothing new. Nothing new.
Yeah, it's been a while.
That's okay.
Hopefully
Okay.
I'll have a home office set up pretty soon where I can start putting more out.
Mm-hmm. So Josh, we said that we would have a separate interview along with your brother too, because your brother apparently is Michael. You're the expert on demonology or something.
Yes. Yeah, I'm the expert. I've been
Yeah.
I've been dealing with him for a long time. So
Okay.
Yeah,
So
he did a video on the powers of darkness and it got deleted from YouTube, if that
really?
tells you anything. So
and
that
yeah, wickedness in high places. That one got taken down. There was a couple, but that was one of them that I really was kind of shocked.
Wickedness in high places.
yeah, we'll have to upload that somewhere safe if he still has it.
I have a really bad copy of it because I tried to screen record it from YouTube. Yeah, it wasn't as great as the original, but
How do we, tackle the topic?
This is a deep topic because
It is.
it's an important topic because it tells us what we're up against in the world. When you always talk about they and you say they are lying to us, people want you to point at an agency, a group of people. Which group of people is it? And when you start seeing how many groups are working together cohesively, it's like, why? How are they working together so well and doing certain tasks worldwide, like we've just seen in the recent years? But things like that where you see the whole entire world doing the same things. And especially when it comes to the truth about creation, the two main things you see world powers agreeing on would be things like guarding Antarctica, space travel. They all do that, so happily, and they just hold hands and it's peaceful.
Yeah.
And you're seeing that now with the pharmakia. And so who they are has a lot to do with that spiritual warfare. And you can see clues that it's going on. And that was where he did his investigation and started seeing a lot of things that it's dark. And it gets really sad, and it's stuff that you wish it wasn't true. But the more digging you do, the more you find out that stuff is going on. It's been going on since biblical times. And it's not just going on because people are rich and they're bored and they're like, hey, why don't I make a sacrifice of a person? These things are ordered by these powers of darkness, and there's a reason they do that. So that's one thing I think would be good to cover and kind of start back to the origin of these entities, who they are.
I think we should have a brief introduction. Let's start from the beginning, but let's not stay there for too long, and then come to today and connect it. So yeah. So demons, how did they come about? I know the fallen angels. I know that story. But now, from my understanding, now when we're talking about demons, we're talking about thousands of different spirits, not just the fallen angels. It's something different. Correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. So okay.
And
I'm gonna let you talk. Yeah.
No, that's good. That's the basic understanding. We know there's when we're growing up with everything, the devil took the blame. It was always the devil's fault, and you're like, okay, who's this one figure? He seemed to take the blame for everything. And it wasn't until I read the book of Enoch that the whole entire Bible started making sense. Who it was, you start seeing Jesus walking around casting out demons. Well, these demons knew that they had a judgment coming. They knew who he was. They knew things. They had a wisdom And I never really thought back then to question, how did they know so much? How did they know who he was? How did they know that their judgment's coming? What is going on? And so when you read the book of Enoch, it talks about how they're made, and you have essentially the fallen angels, the ones that were they had a task, they were supposed to help mankind, but instead they all made a pact, they made an oath, this binding oath to corrupt the world. And when they did that, that oath is something that you still see today, that same exact type of oath. When you look at the Jesuit oath, I highly suggest you read that, unless you are really, I guess, get offended by graphic stuff, because it's very graphic. But that Jesuit oath and the Masonic oaths, where they say these binding contracts, where they're binding themselves, those types of contracts are based on that same format that they used when they said, all right, we're going to corrupt the entire world. And so Genesis speaks of them. What does Genesis say about the sons of God took the daughters of men and they begot children who became basically the Nephilim, or these giants. And so once that happened and the world was corrupt, their punishment was to watch their creations, their beloved sons, essentially battle this clash of the Titans. When you hear about Greek mythology and all these mythologies, a lot of that is based on that narrative, that truth of their offspring fighting it out to the death. And since they came from angels and people, their spirits would go on to become what's known as unclean spirits or demons. And so there's a lot of them, but the watchers themselves, the fallen angels, were bound. And so until judgment. So they all know their judgment is coming. And now they're trying to keep the whole world deceived and sort of carry on the wisdom that was passed on to them. And you can read books like Jubilees that talk about how their wisdom was passed on, the wisdom of the fallen. And so it makes sense, because for the entire world to be behind large deceptions, they can't do it on their own. They need entities that have been here, that have watched civilizations collapse over thousands of years. And so they have playbooks that they go by. That's why you see history repeating itself all the time.
So.
Yeah. And something he brought up, he was talking about in the New Testament, when Jesus encountered demons and they seemed to know who he was. They knew a judgment was coming. When I did a video, it's been about 4 years ago now, maybe. I think it was called "Can God Still Love a Satanist?" And I was listening to testimonies of people who were ex-Satanists. They used to follow the satanic world. They were either born into it or they were kind of recruited into it. And a lot of their stories were very similar. But one of the things I heard over and over again was when they talked about encountering God, there were usually people around them that had a really strong connection to God. There was somebody, a mom, an aunt, a sister, somebody who was really strong in their prayer life, somebody who was connected to God. And in the spiritual world, even though these people are on the demonic side, they would hit this force field or this wall where they were trying to do something really bad. Like one guy was trying to go kill a family member, and he was a Satanist. He was doing the rituals, doing all this stuff, and had been in it for years. And something physically stopped him from climbing over this fence. He was trying to get over to her house, and he said he could see this figure standing there kind of guarding, and he didn't understand it at the time, but he was like, he physically couldn't get himself over this wall. Whatever the demons that were using him to do these things, they have limits based on the presence of God around them and the power and the authority that believers hold, real believers. And I heard multiple Satanists talk about that there was a difference in a Sunday church Christian and somebody who was really walking with God. Those are the kind of people that, one guy was a hitman, and he was told, hey, you kill this woman for me. And they knew he was a Satanist, and they knew that he could put a curse on someone and have them die. And this guy said that Satan came to him and said, abort that mission. Her God will not let us touch her. And he thought, what in the world? He didn't realize there were limits to what he could do. But, in the spiritual world, there was a certain kind of protection over these believers and people who had a strong walk with God. So it's kind of, I think they want us in the dark about that so that we go around as easy targets. In a battle, we don't even know what's going on.
Yeah, and that's why it says no one can curse what the Father has blessed. Like once you're blessed and he's protecting you, those curses are null and void. They don't affect you. but they are real. That's why the Bible tells us not to do those things, not to do witchcraft, not to do all those evil things they're doing, talking to familiar spirits, which they would try to pretend it's someone who died, and that this loved one you're talking to is beyond the grave and you're reaching, across some dimension, when in reality, it's just familiar spirits, demons who are familiar with certain people. And that's why these psychics and people that are talking, they may even be deceived into thinking they're talking to somebody who's deceased, but they're really talking to these unclean spirits. And so it gives people a false view of what's in the afterlife. And it has them doing things that the Bible tells us not to do. And there's a reason, because these unclean spirits aren't going to give you good advice. They're not going to give you something that profits you. They're trying to give you all these things that will cause you to stumble, fall, ruin your marriage, all those different things.
So can we go back to the history? What are these demons? Where did they come about? Since they're not the fallen angels.
Yeah, I wish I had my my copy of the Book of Enoch with me, but it says essentially
I have
when they
it.
fought
If
it
you want
out.
me to bring it.
Yeah, I wish I had the verses, because I've done a video on this before. But when they fought, it said they died, but since they came from these angels, they have, they're kind of like half human, half immortal, but so their spirits lived on. Their spirits are living on forever. And so right now, those same exact spirits from way back before the flood, pre-flood, those creatures, they became unclean spirits. Those spirits remained. So after the flood, they were tormenting people. And I forget which book it was that was speaking of that. It was Jubilees, maybe, where it was like, hey, we're being demonized, a lot like you heard of in the New Testament. Do something about this, because I don't want the world to get as corrupt as it was before the flood, because he had witnessed all of this corruption Noah had. He's the only one that had witnessed it, him and his family. And so he didn't want it to get that way. So they bound a bunch of them. We're not dealing with as many as there would be, but we're still dealing with a lot. I don't know exactly how many, but when Jesus was talking to the possessed man, it says this man was possessed. He was breaking chains. He was doing all these different things. They could not bind him. So when Jesus talked to the demon, he said, "What is your name?" So Jesus knew that these entities had their own individual names. And that's why you see all these different cultures worshiping different gods with different names, because it's these different unclean spirits. And sometimes they could be, most of them go back to Babylon. But you see those same figures uprooting in today's world, because it's the same unclean spirits, even the ones that have to do with like pride. I think it was Bel and Ashtaroth that they worshipped in the Bible. And Ashtaroth was this goddess of like pride, and she had her own month, and it was June, and now we have Pride Month and it's in June. Like a lot of that stuff kind of carries over to modern day culture, and we don't realize it's demonic. We don't realize these doctrines we're learning about the stars, the things that we learned about heaven. The Book of Enoch that talks about these demons gave us a prophecy that they would take these chiefs of the stars that we now call planets and take them to be gods. And so throughout all these ancient cultures, you see them worshiping these stars as gods, but and they all have these names. Their names, Jupiter and Pluto and Neptune, they're all named after these ancient deities, these unclean spirits. And so to think that ancient people I used to look back at those stories of them worshiping these statues and think these were just a bunch of idiots. Why would they go after seeing the Red Sea part and worship a golden calf? Like, are they just that ignorant? Well, and you start kind of thinking we're not that ignorant anymore. However, we've all picked up on false systems and had false views of everything our whole lives. And it's because of those unclean spirits being crafty and deceiving us to do so. And so we have to be humble and know that they were up against those powers back then. We still are today. We just have a quite different example to live by. We have the Messiah who showed us how to handle these things. That power structure changed. They thought they were going to win at the crucifixion, but instead it was a chain reaction that now we have that exact same authority he had to cast them out. And so their reign is limited based on us. So they don't want us to know they exist. They benefit by us going, this is all fake. There's no demons. There's no God. They want us to be separated far from that reality. So to them, with it, like he was seeing with his research, the spiritual realm. What did they say about it to the ones that are like Satanists worshiping?
Well, they were saying that the one guy, John Ramirez, he said that the spiritual world is more real than the natural world to them. They understand it. And one thing that kind of caught me was that his parents, because he was born into this religion, to this cult, he said they would stay up all night in communication with the devil, like what we would refer to as prayer with God, but they're up chanting and talking. And he said they even had their own demonic tongue that they would speak to the devil with. And a lot of them would say that the devil would appear to them as a person, or it would manifest himself in some way. And it was kind of it was interesting to see their take on it, because the way most Christians live is we don't fully understand the gravity of how real the spiritual battle is, or how important it is to be in tune with God. But our enemy was out there, and man, they understand that it's real, and the people that are behind the deceptions, they understand the spiritual side of it. And that's why it's so important to them that we don't know there's a God above and there's a heaven above, and that, you know, we are in a special place in God's creation. And we were kind of warned about this. We're not, you know, we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers of darkness. These types of things are really what we're at war against, and I think most of us have no idea.
Yeah.
Okay. Just a minute, Josh. So, are we saying that, for example, in Greece, the Greek mythology, all the titans and the gods and the heroes are demons now?
Yeah, pretty in a nutshell, yes. There's and it never really dawned on me until I was listening to Rob Skiba talk about that, because these people, like, you hear all these legends, like this god here killed this god and this god fought this god. Well, part of their punishment was their punishment was to fight to the death. And so you see a lot of Zeus worship and all these things, temples to Zeus and different names, all these people, Odin, and you look at the Apollo missions, who was a sun god. Artemis, that's going on right now, was his sister, or was Artemis the sister of Apollo?
Yes. They were twins.
And then you have Orion, who was real big. You're noticing all these different things. We did a video about Orion.
The Orion capsule.
Yeah, they have the Orion capsule showing us what the world doesn't look like now. But it's paying tribute to those demons, and they're still deceiving the world. And it's interesting that they're using those names that the Bible says to not even mention. It says don't even let the names of those other gods be heard out of your mouth. And here we are praising them as children, going, let's go Apollo mission, you know, like we're always saying them and cheering them on. And that's what they tell you. They want it to capture your imagination, which is like kidnapping your imagination. Kidnapping would sound too harsh, so they're like, we're just going to capture it and we're going to keep it right here. So that's I think there's a lot more to that Greek mythology.
The story of the Titans, I believe it goes directly back to the Nephilim, and the same geographical region, right, where it started.
Yeah. Can new demons be created now that there are no more Nephilims?
You would have to have a repeat, I would think, of what the fallen did. Like, you'd have to have more angels, and that's the interesting thing. Like, after the resurrection, we're going to have bodies that are incorruptible, but the angels, they can actually choose corruption, and they did, which is mind-blowing that they would do that. But that just shows you their nature, that they had that ability, that free will like we do, to go, I think I'm going to take of that fruit, or I think I'm going to try this. I'm tempted. I'm going to do that, you know, like enforcing their own will. And looking recently, since the last time we talked, I've been studying the law and the book of the law and the things in the Bible. And I came across this book from a guy named Aleister Crowley. He was always telling me about Aleister Crowley and some of the evil things he did and promoted, the child sacrifice and all that. And you see a lot of rock stars in the 50s and 60s saying they're into what they call Crowleyism, where they're following his religion. And he essentially has now, and you notice these demons, they always copy what the Creator does. Our Father had a sacrificial system and a temple with high priests. What does satanic temples have? They require sacrifices. They have a high priest. And you look back through these demons in the past, these unclean spirits, throughout the Bible, it says they were sacrificing children to these beings. You look at history, not just in the Bible, overall history, they were sacrificing to these same entities. And his book, he says, was dictated to him by 3 demons. And when you look back at Egyptian deities, you always see them in 3s. When you look at other cultures, their gods are in groups of 3s, and they mimic that. Rome has kind of taken that and tried to merge that with Christianity a lot. That's a whole other controversial subject. But Aleister Crowley was allegedly talking to these demons, and if you remember in Revelation, is it Revelation? It talks about the unclean spirits like frogs, deceiving the kings, coming out of the mouth of the beast and the false prophet. So they're deceiving the world, these unclean spirits like frogs, and that was what they were seeing. And it looks a lot like the common alien, the little long fingers, the long skinny fingers, the alien imagery that we see now. And so Aleister Crowley drew the demon that manifested to himself, and it looked a lot like what we would call an alien of today. Mm-hmm. And his book, just like you read in the Bible where you talk about the book of the law that Father gave them, he calls his book the book of the law. And the entire premise of this book is to be lawless. And the main quote is, "Do as thou wilt." Essentially, just do whatever you want. They want you to partake in lawlessness. And when you go back to the Bible, it tells us in the last days, lawlessness is going to increase. And so that's why you and I are seeing, when we watch the world, we're going, wow, it's getting lawless very fast. People are just promoting adultery. They're promoting this lifestyle of materialistic stuff, people doing what they want and being whatever gender they want to be and all of that. And it all goes back to those prophecies and those demons doing exactly what they said they were going to do. And so that book is, I don't recommend anybody reading that book, because these demons are very cunning. They try to act like, I want to read just a small quote. I don't want to read a whole lot, but they want you believing in deep space. They want you believing that our Creator is nowhere close to you. And one of them says, "Now you shall know that the chosen priest and apostle of infinite space is the Prince Peace, the Beast, and in him and in his woman called the Scarlet Woman is all power given. They shall gather my children." He always, trying to talk like there's some sort of God. "My children into their fold. They shall bring the glory of the stars into the hearts of men." And so they claim to be this infinite space, infinite stars. They want their own believers to believe in that just endless universe. They don't want to talk about the firmament. They're not just deceiving us, they're deceiving the whole world about that, the kings of the earth. So it's a worldwide thing that's brought about by these unclean spirits.
Michael or Josh, the last time we spoke, Josh, we touched on astrology. I told you that I have studied astrology. And then I found out, it was one of the watchers taught the humanity astrology. And now we're talking about, how important space is to them and the stars. And so I want to ask why it's important to them to, start focusing on the sky and the stars and the constellations and the planets. What's the connection with why astrology is bad? It's demonic. And you understand my question? What's the connection? I don't understand it.
Yeah, the stars, like that prophecy in Enoch said, that the chiefs of the stars would leave their orbital paths, and we would take them to be gods, or an upcoming generation would, and err in their understanding of what these things are. And of course, now we think they're suns and there's all of that stuff. But they have studied them. They are significant. People were always seeking, it says in the book of Jubilees, the things they weren't supposed to know. Like if I tell you, hey, you're not supposed to know this. This is like secret stuff from heaven. Like these fallen wanted to teach people stuff. And that's how they lured people in. Like, you're not supposed to know this, but that star there is going to do this, like trying to use these things to study them, because they are designed like a perfect timepiece above all these stars in the firmament, where he set them on day 2, or not on day 2. He made the firmament on day 2 of creation. It wasn't until later that he put the sun, the moon, the stars in there. But they've always studied them. They knew so much more about them than we do now, because they've aligned. You go around the world, you see structures aligned with Orion's belt, like the pyramids in Egypt are aligned with it. But they associated them with their gods, like Orion. They think, Orion was thrown up there, and that's where he is now. So we're going to worship that constellation, pray to that constellation. They always said growing up, make a wish on a star. If I don't know if they did that to you guys, but when we were growing up, it was like you had your lucky star.
If you wish upon a star.
Yeah. You want to become a rock star. You want to become a superstar. Like there's all these things with stars. And like that demon said, that their goal is to bring, it says, the glory of the stars into the hearts of men. And so they want us looking at them. They don't want us not studying them. They want us being fascinated by them, using them for astrology. And like the first pope that approved the heliocentric model, he was deep into astrology. Pope Paul the Third, maybe. It's been a while since I've done that study, but yeah, they were big into that. And so
yes, but why?
We talked about tarot card reading. Didn't you talk about that then the last time we were on tarot card reading? Do we touch on that?
Yes,
I think so. But yeah, that came from a similar group, because Aleister Crowley called his group Thelema, and their logo they took was exactly the same, pretty much exactly the same as the group, the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, and they had the exact same little symbol, and that's where those things come from. So it's that same type of wisdom, just passed on, slightly changed, so that they can use it to deceive people, so that
they're all
people
connected.
have no clue. Like children, we have children at school using those things. They don't have a clue where they come from. They're not like, hey, these are demonic. Here, learn this. They're like, oh, here's something that's going to tell you the future. It's cool. And so we think of this stuff as just really cool, trending, and like they make it seem really awesome and innocent. I mean, we played with a Ouija board growing up, and we thought that was a blast. We had no clue what we were doing. With no clue. But yeah,
yes, but I still don't understand. I still don't understand why this connection with the stars and the sky is important to them. Why they want us, fascinating.
I think
Fascinated.
I think a big part of it is that it's things we can see, and somehow they've related that to like especially the sun god worship. The sun god is more significant to them, that aspect, when you look through history, than the stars themselves, because Nimrod was, reincarnated as his son Tammuz, and so then they have that connection there, and people are worshiping Tammuz thinking he's actually a sun god. Somehow I don't know what lying signs or wonders they did to convince people that these were gods, because then of course Tammuz dies, and now there's, it talks about in the Bible women weeping over Tammuz. They're sad, and so to deify themselves, all the world leaders would, when they would die, they'd have a statue erected of themselves looking like Helios. And but I think one of the main reasons why it's so significant is they knew the deception to come. They knew they would take the Father's version of creation and corrupt it. They knew that they had to really understand these stars and how they work, so that they could explain it mathematically and make it almost make sense.
They had to reverse engineer the geocentric model. I mean, when you look back at the sacred geometry, it showed the exact path that the stars were always taking, that all these orbits were very perfect, meticulously placed. Like, it was no denying that the heavens above are doing something that's just really, really repeatable, predictable. But yeah, that's one thing that always interested me, was when you look at the birth of Jesus and the wise men who came and said, they knew that the king was going to be born in Jerusalem. They knew this stuff was going to happen. Mm-hmm. Well, how on earth did they know? And when you look back at the stars, doesn't it say that they were made for signs and for seasons, like appointed times?
Mm-hmm.
I feel like there's some information there that we've kind of lost in time.
Yeah. Well, they say they're for signs and appointed times. And when you look at what it says Lucifer's saying he's going to establish himself on the mount, or I'm trying to think of the exact wording. I don't want to misquote the Bible. But basically he's going to change the appointed times. And in our version of the Bible, it says congregation. Well, that word in its original form, it wasn't even congregation. It makes no sense there. It was appointed times, or moedim. And so their goal is to change the appointed times. And that's why you see in Christianity now, people are like, hey, I want to keep the feast days. Well, the calendars have changed. Right now in Ethiopia, it's like 2015. You know, like they've got the Gregorian, the Julian, they've had all these different things they're doing to our calendars. They don't want us to really know exactly where we are. And it kind of leaves us kind of floating out there in space. Like, where are we? We know that in the Bible, each year, or 1,000 years is as a day. And so once we get to the end of that 6,000 year period and we're approaching where we think we're getting close to now, which would be like a seventh day. If you look at each day as 1,000 years, like it tells us to later on, I think in First Peter or Second Peter, I can't remember. But that would be significant. So they know their time's running out. They want to keep track of time. When they see certain things, days getting shorter. That's why you see all those sundials, I would think, everywhere, those giant obelisks that go back. You see them everywhere, imported from Egypt to Rome, to America, to France. They import those things from Egypt because of their ties to the ancient sun god worshiping. It mentions it in the Bible in certain translations, the obelisks of Heliopolis. It's hard to say those two words. But those things are important. So important that the popes would say, hey, you're going to deliver this obelisk here and from Egypt, and if it breaks, you die. Like, you're going to get murdered for this thing. That's how much they care about these structures. And they set them up in a way that makes them look exactly like a sundial. I'm not sure if that's their purpose, but they have them all around the world in every it seems like every powerful country has one somewhere. We have the Washington Monument, the thing that's, what is it, like 666 feet high or something weird, or 606 something. It's like this weird height. It's like, I forget how they map it out, but it's all interconnected, and that's the fun part about this research, is seeing how interconnected it is and how you can go back to the word and find exactly where it told us, hey, stay away from that. Or this is, when you see the Father being angry and you see the wrath, there's a reason, and you start finding out the things they were doing back then is a lot like, are identical to what they're doing now.
Okay. So is it a good time to make the transition to today? So before we do that, let me do a recap. So the Watchers, the fallen angels, they made it with humans. They created the giants, the Nephilim. The Watchers are no longer here because they're bound to wherever they are. The Nephilim, when they die, their bodies die, but their spirits, because they're half angel, half human, they sort of are in limbo, and they become demons, and they stay here on earth as spirits, and they're looking for human bodies to puppeteer or something. So we have a specific amount. We have a specific amount of demons, a specific number. It's not. We cannot have more now or less. It's one number throughout history. Correct.
Yeah. And that's why the word says devils. It's a lot of times it's plural. Devils would be like demons, unclean spirits, but it'll just say there were devils. It just depends. There's so many different translations on these words. But you were saying about the giants, and what fascinated me recently is how they use this. There were these giant creatures that roamed the earth millions of years ago type of narrative, and you start digging and it gets so weird. The deeper you dig with the dinosaur narrative, the weirder it gets. And it actually it's fascinating, because I thought about it. These things were sort of invented like in the 1800s, and then people started finding them. They would be everywhere. These things would be everywhere to get, to the amount of life we have today, billions of species. But if these creatures, these Nephilim, died and their spirits were still here, it seemed they would know where their bodies died at. They would be like, okay, the crime scene is this way. They would be able to direct people. And so I think that's why these people that are looking for them are the only ones that seem to find them, instead of, hey, Farmer Joe was over here digging in his backyard and he found a T-Rex. It's always like, these paleontologists are out on a mission and they just happened to find a Titan, and they literally call it a Titan. There's a Titanosaurus in its femur. I mean, it's massive. It looks like a giant human femur, and they don't ever show you the complete replica. It's like, here's this big leg bone, but it was this Titanosaurus, and here's a drawing of it. And so I started looking just recently. I'm looking to see how many complete dinosaur skeletons do we have.
None.
And there's none. I'm like, what? Like, I thought, you see them at the museums, you think there's just thousands everywhere, but they don't have a complete set. And when they say they do, you try to find a picture of it and you can't. And there's a guy in California who was at the university in microscopy. He was looking at dinosaur specimens under a microscope, and he started dissolving them. His name is Mark Armitage. And he found soft tissue, like spongy tissue and nerve cells and all these different things. And he's like, this is impossible. These things would have to be thousands of years old for this to happen. And so he ends up doing a cross section of the bones, and he finds, this is the crazy part, inside the bone, there's these, he can see these dark pigment looking areas, and he finds out it's iron in these bone pores, which means that there was blood clotting. And he says it's the same type of blood clotting you would expect if these organisms had drowned, if they died from drowning. And so it made me wonder, what if some of them were alive when the flood happened and they drowned? Because he said on every continent, they're finding the exact same evidence of drowning on these large bones. And I'm like, wow, this to me matches up a lot with the book of Enoch, that these creatures died. They didn't die from an asteroid. They didn't just die, oh, something blocked out the sun. Now we're all these massive creatures that have survived off of vegetation. I mean, could you imagine a long-necked dinosaur, the Titanosaurus? They're kind of shaped like dragons anyways. When you see the dinosaurs, they're always shaped like these dragon creatures, long necks, except they just take the wings off. T-Rex with their short little arms. Like, they're kind of laughable the way they look. But yeah, there's some definite interesting connections when you start finding this proof. And that guy, Mark Armitage, was fired after he made this discovery. It should have went worldwide. This should have been like the most viral story in the news. And they're like, you're fired. And so he has to go to court and battle them, because they fired him saying that they wanted him to keep his religion out of the university. And it was proven that no, it wasn't religious. It was a scientific, verifiable fact.
It's discovery.
And so, it was a discovery. He made a discovery. He wasn't bringing in theories. He's like, this is what I've discovered. And so now he does his own thing and has a really cool website that I could share with you. It's Dinosaurs. It's DSTRI, Dinosaur Soft Tissue Research Institute.org. So it's like DSTRI.org. And really cool findings. A lot of people get mad at you when you look into the dinosaur thing, because they're like, dinosaurs are a hoax. And yes, they are, as the narrative we've been told. But I think there's something to these bones that we can prove are thousands of years old and not millions of years old. And that changes everything. That lines up exactly with the flood story. And that's why a lot of them are fossilized so easily, is because of a flood. It takes floods to do those things in large amounts.
Yeah. Okay. So, Michael, your research, what did you find through your research?
Well, I was really kind of focusing on people who had been in the demonic world and came out of it, because I wanted to hear their stories. And I listened to testimony after testimony, and they all seem to have I kept hearing the same thing. And one thing that was interesting to me a lot of times was when these people were about to wake up to Christianity, when there was an influence in their life, somebody that was trying to introduce them to God, or somehow they were questioning what they were doing, they would all hear this same voice telling them to kill themselves. And I found it interesting that they would hear this voice saying, kill yourself. And, you always hear your own thoughts a lot of times. Well, most people would think they're hearing their own thoughts. But it almost seemed like a suicidal spirit was attacking these people before it was trying to kill them before they could wake up to the truth. And, but then they would say, in the middle of hearing this chaos and hearing this voice saying, kill yourself, they would hear another voice saying, I love you. And it was like they were able to, in this spiritual warfare that they were in, somehow God was able to reach out to them. And a lot of them said what pulled them out was somebody coming to them with love, somebody that brought light to them and showed them, hey, God loves you. and it was something that they'd be like, how can God love me? I've done all these terrible things in my cult. I've sacrificed these things. They would always say, there's no way. God's my enemy. How could he love me? And they would always be so shocked that that's how God worked. And one guy specifically, he moved into a town with the high priest. One of these satanic high priests was his good friend, and they moved into this town. And he did not realize when he moved to that town that this was a praying town, a church community where they knew this guy before he moved away and became a Satanist. And they were praying all together in unison, saying, God, bring this guy to you. And he said everywhere he went, people were coming up to him and saying, hey, God loves you. Hey, God. And he was like, I can't even eat a burger at the restaurant without people saying this to me. And it was bothering him. And he said at a certain point, he couldn't function. He was having these like anxiety attacks, and he couldn't go and do things like he was normally doing. And he went to his high priest and he said, something's wrong with me. I cannot function. I can't go and do the things I'm trying to do. And he said, the cult leader told him, he said, you're being angelically oppressed. That the prayers of these people, there are angels that are literally stopping your demons from completing their tasks. And the guy had already known that was the thing, that the prayer world would stop things in the demonic world. He somehow knew that and was like, oh yeah, that's what's happening. And I think to me that was something that stood out, because as Christians and as people who believe, we talk about the power of prayer. I think we underestimate how powerful these prayers are. But they weren't people praying against him and wanting him condemned and wanting him killed. They were praying out of love for him and out of concern. And those prayers were the ones that were stopping things from happening in that spiritual world. And I thought, wow, that is crazy, that somebody who's demon possessed. And eventually he said he had the demons cast out of him. He found somebody who had that authority, and he'd gone to multiple churches and they were like, we don't know what to do with you. But he found somebody who could. And he said once the demons were cast out, he felt peace and joy. And he said he's never been happier since then. Yeah.
So there are good spirits also here on earth.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a definite real war. And as I kind of looked into it more, when you look at the scriptural accounts, it talks about, was it Elijah, when he said, open my servant's eyes so that he can see? Because there was this army that was coming after him, and the servant was like freaking out, and he's like, I don't know what to do. And he said, open my servant's eyes so he can see. And all of a sudden he sees these chariots of fire, and he sees this, basically this heavenly host, this heavenly army that's on their side in the spiritual world. But his eyes had to be open to that so he could see it and understand that we're surrounded by this spiritual warfare. Most of us have no idea it's there, but it's something that in the spiritual world, it's really going on. This stuff, this battle to of good and evil that everyone talks about is really going on behind the scenes. And if you're not awake, once you're awake to it, you can spot it, you can see its influence, you can see how it's trying to mess with your day, how it's trying to impact your life and your family and things like that. But if you're not aware of it, like they would talk about going in intentionally, if a church was on fire for God, they would be sent in these really, like a really beautiful girl would be sent to this church specifically to entice the preacher, because they didn't like how the spiritual world was moving against them in that place. So they were like, yeah, we would be sent a lot of times to go break up certain churches, spread false rumors, create story. So it was like soldiers being sent out into battle, and they're being told, okay, you need to go to this place and do this, you need to go here and do that. And I think a lot of us don't realize that these people attacking you at work or anywhere can actually be awake to your spiritual energy, to your walk with God, and they want to stop those lights from getting brighter and brighter. They want to interfere with you any way they can. And I think a lot of people you'll hear people say, man, I feel like I've just been under attack. I hear people say that all the time. And I think, yeah, there's a really good chance you probably are. They in the spiritual world, they can see who's a threat and who's not.
What would be the signs that you're being under attack spiritually? Are there any physical, symptoms, evidence?
if you're asking God for discernment and for and that's something that we really need to ask. Like in Proverbs chapter 2, it talks about crying out for wisdom and discernment and knowledge, and God will give you these things. If you've asked God for these things and you have the Holy Spirit, you will know, you will get a gut feeling that something's not right. And they always have those sayings like, "Oh, trust your gut." Well, God gives us something that a lot of times it never really, like when I was really connected with God, I remember I went to Disney World one time and I was walking in kind of getting ready to line up somewhere, and a guy was walking kind of off to the side. I couldn't even see the guy. He was wearing, I just knew he was wearing like a black t-shirt. He had been in my vicinity. I heard a voice say he worshipped Satan. And I remember thinking like that. I thought I was just coming up with that thought. And I looked over at him and I thought, why am I judging this guy? I don't even know him. Well, he cut around in front of me. And when he stood in front of me, he had a shirt with Jesus upside down on a cross. And it said, "A curse be upon your Christ," and underneath this image on his shirt. And it was obvious at that point that this guy is satanic. But God's voice was speaking to me about this person to just alert me. And I think there's a spiritual sense of discernment when you've asked for it. And people that are, if you're around somebody who's on the adversary side and they're opposed to you, you'll notice that you'll kind of understand it's like they just hate you for no reason. I had a guy at work who was just, he couldn't stand, like as soon as he walked in a room with me, it was like he couldn't stand to be around me. And I thought, I've never done anything to this guy. And he would try to like spread false rumors about me to administration, and I couldn't figure it out. And then I realized it was a spiritual attack. This guy I don't even know if he knew he was being used to try to anger me and try to get me to retaliate. And everybody would say, well, you need to do this back to him. And it's like, well, God doesn't operate that way. Pray for your enemy, love your enemy. And that's how we're going to overcome these spiritual battles. It says overcome evil with good. That's the kind of thing that the devil wants us trapped in, this revenge mentality. If somebody hurts you, get them back, kind of thing. And I think when we're in the spiritual warfare and people are coming after us, only showing them love that's really the only way that's going to kind of win them back over or wake them up from their sleep.
Yeah. Also, I think that only God can, judge, and
Yeah.
if there is a punishment or whatever, he is a decider, and not us, what to do with these people. Yeah. Okay. So why now? Why now it's so evident? I mean, I guess evil was always here, operating under the behind the scenes, but now they're not hiding anymore. They're not. What changed?
No.
Why now?
I think it's this that they know their time's running out and prophecies have to be fulfilled. And so that lawlessness that was spoken of is going to get bad. Like times are going to get worse. Like it talks about people being lovers of self.
As in the days of Noah.
Yeah.
When it was so bad that everybody was full of sin all the time, we're heading back to that.
Yeah. And they were warned too. I mean, they had people just think, oh, this evil creator just flooded the earth because they were bad. They had 100 years to turn back. It's like, you've got this, okay, the Father's telling this guy, hey, there's going to be a flood if they don't, there's going to be a judgment. And they're like, we're good. We're just going to keep getting married, doing our things and corrupting all flesh, sacrificing children to these beings. Like whatever, all the stuff they were doing, the book of Enoch, I highly recommend it. I know a lot of people say it's not in the Bible, it's not in the canon. But it is in the Dead Sea Scrolls. And it matches the version that was brought here, at least to America, like before the Dead Sea Scrolls were found. And so to me, in that sense, it has some validity, but it talks about what the demons taught us. They taught us abortion. They taught us the art of makeup, being seductive with makeup. The invention of mirrors. And that does not seem too bad. You think, a mirror, how is a mirror bad? Well, then you look at the modern day mirror, it's a selfie. We're always looking at our own image. We're always worried about how good we look. It becomes about pride, and everything that we are around programs us to be prideful. The music, the lyrics we hear, all these things. I could remember being a young child and hearing certain songs and just feeling more prideful just from hearing a song. and thinking, I'm the man, this song makes me feel like I'm the stuff. Like it just, your ego starts getting really big, and you're always overly exposed to this corrupt material. You can hardly get on social media now, and at the just tip of your fingers, there's just seductive things, and that's just a step beyond this looking glass, looking into things, seeing things, and things that we would never see in our everyday lives. People can look at in seconds. And someone made a really good comparison, like their husband had this addiction to adult content. And they said, imagine if he was going into someone's house and watching this, and you caught him, like that's essentially what they're doing. But we look at it like, oh no, it's just on a device, it's not that big a deal. And that's the sneaky way they corrupt people. But yeah, they've come out of hiding. And that's what's freaky, because it's like, it's on mainstream stuff now. It's on your family channels. We used to have like ABC Family, and now it's like on ABC Family, you turn it on, there's two guys making out, and you're like trying to throw a blanket over your daughter's eyes. Like it's openly out there. Celebrities doing satanic symbols, and it's like there's something shifted around 2019, 2020, and it's a spiritual thing. I think it probably has to do, maybe there was more. It also seemed like this is what I thought was interesting too, about that wisdom of the fallen coming back. We had a big technology boom like 100 years ago. Technology just went insane, and I would have never thought we would have what we do today back in the 90s when we were kids growing up in the 80s, that we would have watches that we could put on and just talk to people and do it live, kind of like, like it's actually impressive to think that we're talking to you in Greece right now in pretty much real time, things like that. It's technology, when over 100 years ago we had candlelight, like it was like we didn't even have like electric powered houses not that long ago. It really wasn't.
Yeah, and I think Rob Skiba did a teaching on that, talking about how these fallen ones would be bound for a certain amount of generations, and he said, and if you do the math, that it comes right
They're
into
out.
where basically technology took off.
Yeah, I've never done the math on that, but I'm sure if he has, it was probably pretty legit about some of them being loosed for just a little while here towards the end.
Yeah, I think you're also right, Josh, that they have messed with the calendars, so we don't really know where we're standing in terms of the final days. Maybe that was the whole point, so that we're not aware where we're standing. How far it is, the judgment. Is it in 10 years? Is it in 100?
Yeah, we could be missing 1,000 years. That's what a lot of people are like, they've changed it. We're not this far along. There's 1,000 years missing, and I don't get into all of that. I do feel like we're somewhere close to what would be biblically the seventh day, which is that day of rest. And I would equate that to the millennial reign. And so we're getting very close to that 1,000-year period. And then it's the final judgment after that. I mean, that's it. You make it or you don't, but you want to be a part of that first resurrection so you don't experience the second death. And that's a big thing he's taught a lot about, is that second death, that fate of the wicked. You hear about this eternal punishment, and everybody always talks about, they scare so many people away from our loving Father, because they mistake our punishment with the punishment of these demons and unclean spirits and the fallen. Those creatures, those entities that are unclean spirits, are going to go on and be punished, and they're not going to die like we would if we were the wicked ones, the lawless ones. People partaking in lawlessness, they're going to perish. They're going to experience the second death. It's not going to be pleasant. There's going to be a lake of fire.
They're going to be cast into fire, but
it's not going to be a forever and ever. Your grandmother, who was a non-believer, is going to be burning in a lake of fire for eternity, just because of her short 70-year lifespan where she was an unbeliever. And that's sort of what scares so many people away. They think that's the Father's judgment, but his judgment is just, and the punishment will fit the crime, but it's not going to be like it's a big word study. And we did a video on it recently. You have to go to the live videos to see it. It's controversial. We're not saying there's no punishment. A lot of people think that's, we're trying to lead people to lawlessness by saying you're not going to be punished, because that's what the demons say. There is a punishment, but the unbelievers aren't going to be burning eternally forever and ever and ever just because of their lifespan of crime against humanity now. But it's not going to be pleasant when he says, "Depart from me, Those of you who practice lawlessness, that's not going to be a pleasant thing. You're going to die that. You're going to eventually die the second death if you've already died. So,
Michael, can one demon possess multiple people, many people, or it has to be one, one-on-one?
From what I have seen, it's a personal possession of sometimes. One person can be possessed. They spoke about being possessed with multiple demons, and they had demons cast out of them. But it seems like they're really very limited to who they are influencing at the time. But I don't know of any. In all the research I did, I never heard of 2 or 3 people being possessed by the same demon. It never seemed like it went from this person to this person and kind of back and forth. It seemed like it was always with this person, and it physically. However it got invited in, it had to be kicked out. That seemed to be the trend. Was they didn't just all of a sudden it was gone. It was somebody with authority in the kingdom of God had to walk in and cast this thing out. And so it was almost like they have to really be invited in through. I don't know if it's always intentional, but something in your life has to bring them in, and someone with the Spirit of God, or someone's specifically encountering God and God doing it for them would have to be. But they always talked about, even after they encountered God, they had to get the demon cast out. So I thought that was interesting that a lot of them would say, they had this encounter, they heard God's voice, and they knew that they needed help, and they went to somebody, and there was just somebody around them that was like, this is what you need to do. We need to cast this demon out of you. Because it's almost like they act on permission. They have to be invited in and kicked out, kind of thing.
How will you know?
And a creepy story along those lines. This is creepy. Our dad told us this story. He worked in a prison. The one where he was talking to this lady. She was being demonized. She didn't know it, but she was always having all this drama. And it was his wife's friend. And she calls and she's crying. She's like, I had the worst day and I just lost it. Like everything's awful. This person hates me. This person said this, and everything was bad. And my dad hears her crying and being belligerent, and he takes the phone and he goes, listen, just don't let the enemy see you sweat. And he gave the phone back to his wife after he said a few things to her. And well, sure enough, he goes to work in the prison, and the next day it's like everyone is just trying to make him angry and provoke my dad to anger. They're saying like mean, hateful stuff to him. He forgot something and left it out of place, and then this person's snapping at him, and a prisoner's getting him mad. And this pattern happened for a couple days. And my dad said, good, happy-go-lucky Christian guy finally just loses his cool. This guy does one thing to him, and my dad snaps at the guy and like says something real authoritative and loud to him because he's over top of these prisoners. He's kind of like their boss. Yeah. And the prisoner winked at him and goes, "Don't let him see you sweat," and walked away, like as if the demon had talked to him and had him do that. That was demonizing that woman. So it was creepy that there's like this, like they'll go after just to show you who they are. That was, to me, that was like, wow, that does not seem random. That the same quote after he had his meltdown, and it's like after that went away, he started praying about that. That was kind of creepy.
How will you know? I'm thinking about myself now because I was practicing tarot reading and astrology, and I had this 3 mini series of interviews with a lady in the US, Corinna Kraft, and she used to teach yoga, and she understood that she was demonized by a yoga demon, or I think a yoga demon. Gosh. She said yes, and she had to cast it out. She cast it out herself, and I think she told me that there were a few others also. So it was unintentional. She didn't invite them, but the practice did. That's what she told me. So how will you know? Because I don't think I can do what Corinna, because in her interview she tells me what she did. She went in front of a mirror and first she fasted, and she prepared herself for 30, 40 days, and then she did that. And in the name of Jesus Christ, she in front of a mirror, and she cast them out herself. But I don't think I can do that. I'm not.
Yeah.
How will you know if you're unintentionally demonized by a demonic
I think,
practice or something?
Well, you would see the fruits of that. God, it tells us the fruits of the Spirit, love, joy, peace, long suffering, all these things that are fruits of the Spirit. If you're seeing things that are the opposite of that, like constant fear, anxiety, depression, and you hear that voice that you think is your own voice a lot of times, I think a lot of people deal with that and they don't realize that something invited it in and it has to leave. These people who are just paralyzed by anxiety and fear, a lot of times that's a spiritual attack, and it manifests itself in what feels physical, and they're thinking, well, I just need to take a medication. I can, you can kind of help the side effects, but really only God can deliver us from that. It's like these people who are, like, for example, my uncle who was into alcohol and drugs and all these things, and it was just as part of his lifestyle. That was how he was. And when God set him free, it was complete deliverance. He never once wanted it again. He never took another drink, and because God set him free from it. And it was like almost like a generational curse that people are having to lift when they take these things off of them.
and I think it's tied to a lot of the things that we let into our mind and to our heart with lust and things that, especially online, you notice that people, they have these addictions to lust, and it's so consuming they can't stop. Like people that spiral down into pedophilia, they admit when you interview them, they're like, I can't stop myself from doing these things and wanting to do these things. It's out of my control. You become a slave to your flesh, like it talks about in the Bible, being set free from your flesh and walking in the Spirit. It sets you free from that slavery because it ruins their jurisdiction. They can no longer, when you're walking in the Spirit, they can't go up and be like, you need to kill yourself, or hey, you need to click on that. It sets you free from your flesh. And that's the only way that I was ever able to be set free from certain temptations, is through the Holy Spirit guiding me. And it wasn't something I could do. Every time I tried to do it on my own, I would mess up eventually, or I would do good for a little while and then think, look at me, here I am, all righteous, and then bam. And so when you lean on the Holy Spirit and tell the Father, hey, I'm ready to be done with this, I don't want this to have any more control over me, I'm leaving this up to you, you get set free from it. So it's definitely one of those things that even a believer, I feel like, can be demon oppressed. Not necessarily like you're possessed by a demon and you're being controlled like a puppet,
but the influence.
They could influence you, like these tempting spirits, adultery. That's why believers have committed adultery in the past and done things, because they can still be tempted in every way that I guess anybody could. Even the angels were tempted, So it's powerful stuff. It's blinding.
Josh, what are you saying now? That all temptation comes from demons?
Not necessarily, but when you feed it and you give into your flesh and you're not walking in the Spirit, it seems to get stronger. It seems to be like this. Like when you give into it, it's like consuming and blinding, and people don't see the consequences. And so like when wasn't there a verse that talked about adultery? Like there's multiple spirits, and usually it's like a blinding spirit. So people don't see the outcome of, once they entertain that, oh, I want to cheat on my wife with this person, they don't see the outcome of losing time with their kids, this friendship that they've had, the family. They don't see all the consequences. They see the immediate. So it's really a blinding spirit, and it takes, see, there's a lot of people praying for you, or you stepping out and praying for that to be just lifted away, because it's extremely, I've seen it wreck a lot of these things. That the fleshly things ruin so many people, and it seems so innocent at first, a lot of these things. And it's like, oh, we're doing this in the dark, it's no big deal. But it just, to me, it seems like there's something demonic about it. I can't prove that there is, but it just seems, obviously the fruits of the things that these people are doing is demonic. They promote the stuff they promote with the things that they try to tempt you with. It's not from the Creator. He would not want you looking at those things. He wants you to have nothing to do with them. So I don't know. To me, it just seems like it's a major, major problem, and there's not a lot of help. There's not a lot of help for people or advice offered. It's like, here's access to all this stuff. Do what you want with it. It's legal.
Guys,
It's weird.
how much more time do you have? Because we are about in an hour now. Do you have another
Yeah.
10, 15 minutes?
Yeah, we got
Maybe?
about
Yeah.
10, 15
Oh, yeah.
minutes. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Should I, we have about 7 minutes. I want to stop the recording now. And then
Okay.
the next 15 minutes, can we talk about, what's happening now with the elites and what's the plan and the metaverse and what's going on there?
Yeah.
Because I think there's
Yeah.
a big
Yeah.
connection with demons, your plans. So
They can play in the phone.
the World Economic Forum and Klaus Schwab, is he Zeus? Who is he? He must be someone really important.
Yeah. He definitely looks like a super villain. I don't know
Yeah.
how they choose. Usually they try to make them look like these nice,
Like Bill Gates.
yeah, like
Just
Bill
a little
Gates.
nerd guy.
Yeah. But now they've got him, and
Bill
it's
Gates
like,
doesn't look
golly.
nice. He looks sneaky and
Yeah.
and gross.
Yeah, he
Yeah.
tries to dress up
He
like
was a good friend with Jeffrey Epstein. And once that came out, wow.
Who knows why?
nobody cared though. He's still making medical
He's-
decisions, and he's
No,
not a
no, no.
doctor.
He said, and do you remember his answer when he was asked about Jeffrey Epstein, Bill Gates? He said, whatever, and he's dead now, so it doesn't matter. What does it matter?
He's dead now, so I'm not going to hang out with him anymore.
So, he
Like, I
died.
regret it.
That was a weird response. His responses and his
was.
body language is so
Yeah.
interesting.
He's been really trained on how to not answer questions.
Oh yeah, when he was getting investigated for his like fraud way back in the day, he just looked like a spoiled kid. It was so sad.
They'd ask him a question that he didn't want to answer, and he'd go, "I don't know what you mean by that." And I'm
Yes.
like, "That's a really good answer for someone trying not to incriminate
I
themselves."
don't understand what you're asking me. And he never did.
Are
They're
you
like,
concerned? What do you mean concerned? You're a grown man. You know what that word means.
break that word down. I need prefixes and suffixes explained in Latin. No, he was just like, it's like a spelling bee.
Yeah, I think he has a condition, psychologically. I mean, I think he's in the spectrum
I
of,
can
some sort of
Yeah,
disorder.
I
Yeah.
think he's under mind control a little bit too. And
Yeah,
demonic control.
probably. So, okay.
Yeah, we call them puppets. We are.
So, what do you think? What's their plan? What do you think they're up to? What are they after?
They know what's coming. Like they know the prophecies that are going to come true. They know there's going to be this famine for what, 7 years. I mean, they know the timeline, and they're trying to bring about the things that Scripture tells us is going to happen. They know they can work within that realm.
Yeah, the Euphrates drying up. It's going to get hotter, and to them, it's climate change. And I can imagine. I'm really sensing that this climate change is going to bring about a lot of the regulations that we saw with the pandemic. We're going to have lockdowns. We're going to have days of mandated rest. They're going to make us probably everything shuts down on Sunday because that's their Roman Sabbath, their sun god Sabbath. And so it's going to be, it'll be interesting how it goes. And I think the persecution will follow when people are like, hey, we don't think this is legit. We don't think this is warranted for us to do this. I don't think that me eating bugs instead of cows is going to save the world. And that's the kind of things they're going to have us believing. And now eggs over here in America are like
5 times more expensive.
Yeah, they just jacked up the prices and it's like there's no laws for them to do it or any reason. It's just like, oh, they're expensive now. Same thing with lumber. I mean, they just kind of like do all these things with prices and interest.
It's Putin's fault. The eggs are more expensive.
And I'm hearing a lot of people say that the feed that they're giving their chickens, they'll be like, my chickens just stopped laying eggs. I thought they were getting old, but then I switched out the feed that we were buying with something more natural, and they are producing eggs again. It's almost like it's an intentional like effort where they're giving them GMO foods. There's certain, because they own all the patents to life. I didn't think you can alter life like they did back before the flood. They're doing that now. Now we call it GMO. Things are genetically modified, which we're not supposed to do. And they're doing that, and we're eating it. We're partaking in that. We're eating these things that have been modified, and they own that life. They're acting, they're trying to play God. They're trying to own life. They want to own it. And so yeah, it's weird that there's now less farmers, but there's more food being grown.
Yeah.
There's less slaughterhouses, but there's more meat being slaughtered. And so it's not a really good system right now. The way the Father had it set up, it was based on that farming lifestyle where you're sustaining yourself. You don't need a government when everyone's fulfilling the law perfectly, doing their duties, helping their neighbors, helping the poor. There was even things into the law where you would leave the corners of your field. You wouldn't harvest them, so that if somebody's in poverty, they can go by and there's an apple tree on the corner that's full of apples. There's different things, that they did to support each other, and it was all out of love. And people wanted a worldly king. The Father's people said, we want a worldly king. We want to be like Egypt. We want to be like all these other nations. And he said, okay, you're going to get, he had Samuel tell them, you're going to have, if you want this is what's going to happen. You're going to be taxed. And all of these bad things that we see now that the world leaders are doing to us, we were warned about that, but we wanted our Donald Trumps. We wanted our kings. And so they got the kings. And now today we lose 31% of our paycheck. And it makes it hard for you to give to.
Just talking about, like, we're taxed, like, in one paycheck, $2,000 roughly of our paycheck comes straight out to the federal and state government. And if somebody who said, hey, I'm going to take $2,000 from you, you would feel really ripped off. But it's just that it just comes out of your paycheck. You don't think about it.
No.
It's kind of crazy. But yeah, I think what happened with the pandemic was a practice run of what's going to come next. I think a lot of other countries got hit a lot worse than the United States, and I'm not sure how bad it was where you were, but I feel like it was just a practice run to see what they could get away with and how it worked, and now they know. And the next time it might be climate change, there might be another variant. Who knows?
I'm predicting climate change. Maybe both. We might have.
I think
both.
it's going to be both.
That would be weird.
Both. I think both.
Yeah.
But if we're saying that demons drive the whole agenda. And since they know the prophecies and they know that, they can't win, what are they doing? Are they trying to bring, the prophecies closer? Since it doesn't make sense. What do they believe?
They really believe. Yeah, I think they really feel that they're going to flip the script and somehow, because the Bible talks about the kings of the world and all these rulers, they're gathering themselves together for their battle on this great day where they think they're going to dethrone God and they're going to raise themselves above God. And I think that they really feel like the battle is something they can win, that they can change the system somehow, cheat the system.
I used to think that, but now I think it's more of how many can we get to perish? How many, like, they're against the Most High. They want everyone they can to perish. And the ones that are standing up and joining them, those are the ones that are going to be like stubble under your feet, under their feet.
Ashes under your feet.
Ashes under the feet, yeah. They're not going to stand a chance. But they want people to think there's this extraterrestrial threat. The Father's the bad guy. The ones that are the rebels, the Lucifer, they're always, he's a rebel and we support being a rebel against God. Like, that's the kind of people he wants. And so they're going to deceive these people. It's a lot like the Judas goat, the goat that they send, they put a goat in there among the sheep to kind of lead all the sheep to slaughter. That's what I kind of picture they're doing. And so they have to deceive the kings, and then the kings deceive the people, kind of how we were deceived. As a school teacher, I was deceived by my teachers. They didn't know they were deceived. They deceived me, and then I start deceiving kids, and it's that cycle. It only takes one generation, and they've got that figured out down to an art of how we can go, all right, they're young. Let's put this programming in front of them and just let them run with it. We don't even have to do anything. Let's just program them from pre-K and let them go from, elementary school and onward. So I think that's a lot of what they're doing, is trying to get as many people as they can. Now is the lawlessness, but eventually, like he said, it's trying to battle against the Most High. And I wonder how they're going to really program that, because now they're talking a lot about the alien threat. And
I keep seeing UFO videos popping up.
Yeah.
People seeing these things and they're calling, oh yeah, another UFO visit. I thought that was dying down, but it feels like it's ramped up lately.
Yeah.
I think they're going to start using that again.
I wonder if they want to make the millennial reign seem like it's some UFO, this kingdom coming down from above, the New Jerusalem, and they're going to be like, it's a spaceship from Mars, and distant galaxy. The experts were right; they are here now, and all your loved ones that were good believers. They just happen to be the ones the aliens wanted.
Do they want to make
Yeah.
themselves known in spirit, and that's why they're ramping up the alien thing? So if we see one, we'll think it's a gray alien instead of a demon.
Yeah, that's what it said in Aleister Crowley's book. He said today they call them
Gray, the grays.
angels and demons. Tomorrow they'll call them something else.
Yeah.
And so they're switching.
Trying to rebrand.
They're switching that script, and that's why that demon he drew looked just like an alien. I think that's going to be a good way to hide, a good way for them to hide amongst us, and people we're in love. We fell in love with them. We fell in love with ET. We fell in love with that narrative. And I want to make friends with the aliens. I bet they're friendly. Are they friendly? Are they like us? They'll try to act like us. They'll know our culture. They'll know how to say all the right things, and they might make themselves look all adorable like ET. You never know what they're going to do.
And
people will
basically become our rulers, and not behind the scenes anymore, but legally.
Yeah,
probably.
They'll try to get us to worship other gods.
Amazing. Great times we're living, eh?
Yeah, interesting times. Yeah,
I feel like there's a lot of talk here in just the past couple of days. People in their banks are getting the money's just disappearing, and people have nothing in their bank accounts for like through Bank of America.
What?
And it's starting to feel really real that some big crash is coming. Like gas prices are about to go way up. Eggs have gone up so much, and it's like all these. And like we go through the grocery stores, everything is doubling and tripling in price, and people are like, "How can we?" We're not getting paid more to live like this. And now bank accounts are starting to close out.
They love the chaos. That way they can make order out of it and be in charge, have you dependent on them.
Michael, what do you mean? People are taking their money out of the banks, but that's what you're saying.
Well, they're just recently, the people who have a Bank of America account, lots of people who were putting their money in Bank of America woke up one day and their money was gone, or they had a big negative balance, and they were like, "Where's all my money? Where's my savings?" And it's just gone. And they
what happened?
They haven't really explained exactly what happened yet.
I hadn't heard about that. That's great.
Yeah, I just heard about it today. Actually, was working.
Well, they're gonna have to explain what happened.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, and I'm kind of wondering what the official story will be.
It's a cyber threat. Now we're going to have to get microchips so that our money will be safe in our microchip.
definitely, yes, a cyber attack or something. Yeah, and they emptied the bank account from the fake numbers on the screen.
Yeah, the fake money, our monopoly, digital money is gone.
Yes.
Oh no,
our invisible money's not there anymore.
Yes, there's no more digit on the screen.
Type the numbers back in.
Just add it back. That's what I don't understand. Why can't they just go?
Add it back. Type it, man. Type it.
We're running out of money. Just print some more.
There's nothing we can do. Your digital numbers disappeared. Darn.
Put some more in there.
Amazing.
Ran out of
all right, guys. I don't know. Do you want to add anything else that we forgot to mention? I didn't ask you, and you want to, share?
No, just make sure you stay humble in this search for truth. I think you're doing a great job asking questions, keeping an open mind in this, but also proving all things. We used to have a mindset growing up where we just believed all things and the experts knew everything, but we're finding out that there's more to this existence than what we've been told, and we've just been fed so many things that don't make sense, and it's for a reason.
Yeah, ask for things, ask God for things, whatever your heart is on your heart to know. Ask God, and it's crazy how much wisdom He just pours out on us. When you say, whenever you question something in your mind, when a question shows up, like, for example, why do bad things happen if God is good? If God created this whole, you have a question like that, and you just ask God, why is this? If you really ask Him, you'll be brought to that information, whether it's through Scripture or through somebody who's led by the Spirit. God has a way of giving us wisdom in the things we ask for. Yeah. And discernment.
Yeah. Well, thanks a lot, Maria. It's been a blessing getting to hang out with you again.
Thank you. Thanks to both of you.
Yeah, it's
agreeing.
past
You
your
know,
bedtime now, isn't it?
yeah, way past. It's 12:34.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. It's 5:30 here, so that's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we appreciate you staying up late for us.
Yeah, thanks for having us on.
Thank you very much, guys. Have a great rest of your afternoon,
Oh yeah,
and
we
we'll be in
will.
touch. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Yeah.
keep in touch.
Same
God
here.
bless.
All right. We'll see you, Maria.
Bye bye.